started. Good morning, everyone. On behalf of State Fund, I would like to welcome you to our webinar on ergonomics for employees working from home. I am your host, Jennifer Bailey, with State Fund's Safety Support and Safety Seminar team. Please note that to reduce background noise, all attendees have been muted. Please also take note of the call-in phone number and access code for the webinar on this screen. Mike, can you go ahead and, oh, thank you. We will also put this information in the chat box, so if you need to refer to it earlier, you can look at the beginning of the chat. If you have any problems with audio during the webinar, we recommend that you disconnect from computer audio and reconnect by calling in with your phone. During the webinar, please submit your questions via the Q&A button, which is on the bottom of your screen in the middle if you're viewing from a computer, or it may be in the upper right corner of your screen if you're viewing from a tablet. The chat button is near the Q&A button as shown on this slide. We will try to answer as many questions as possible during the question and answer portion of today's webinar. The presentation part of this webinar should last an hour, which will allow about 30 minutes for questions afterwards. After the webinar, hopefully by this afternoon or early tomorrow morning, we will be emailing all attendees a link to the webinar recording, a copy of the slides for the presentation, as well as a document with links to many of the resources that the speakers will be discussing during the webinar. And Will Amiwera with our Safety Seminar team will also put some key resource links in the chat box in case you want to view them right away. Upon leaving the webinar session, please complete the webinar survey, which will appear on your screen in a new tab. Your feedback is greatly appreciated. I'm happy to introduce our two presenters for this webinar, who are both ergonomic consultants with State Fund Safety and Health Services and Loss Prevention Department. Bonnie Sander has been in the safety and health field for over 30 years, with the past 6 years dedicated to ergonomics. She has a Master of Science in Environmental Health Science and holds certifications in industrial hygiene, safety, and ergonomics. Bonnie provides ergonomic assistance to State Fund policyholders in Southern California. Mike Gugino has been in the workers' compensation and health and safety field for over 25 years. Mike began working in ergonomics in the mid-1990s and has worked in industrial ergonomics as well as extensive experience in office ergonomics. Mike provides ergonomic assistance to State Fund policyholders in Northern California. I will now turn the presentation over to our first presenter, Mike.
Thank you, Jennifer, and welcome everyone. This is a webinar to address a very unique and new set of ergonomic circumstances we find ourselves in. With that in mind, I'll tell you that this is not a comprehensive ergonomics training course. This presentation is designed to address employees working in home offices as a result of the pandemic, and now realizing that these work scenarios are more permanent than we first thought they would be. We're addressing the most common issues we're seeing today, and we want to give you well-balanced solutions. We want to balance high impact and low cost solutions with the biggest ergonomic risks we're seeing. So today we're going to define what ergonomics is very quickly. Then we're going to look at the most common risks that we're seeing. We're going to give you tools to identify those risks. We're going to give you some ideas on how to lower the risks, and then discuss some policy ideas that you might utilize, and then talk about the stresses of working from home. So, why should we worry about ergonomics? Well, Cal OSHA Title 8, Section 3203 is the one that requires all California employers to have an injury and illness prevention program, which requires employers to evaluate hazards, take action to correct hazards, and make sure employees comply with safe and helpful work practices. Every employer is required to have an IITP, so if you don't have one, State Fund has a great IIPP Builder app that works very similarly to the tax prep software where you answer simple questions about your business. And in this case, the IIPP is built for you. So at the end of the presentation, we'll show you how to find that. But poorly set up workstations are a work hazard with a risk of injury, and they do need to be addressed. Also, in times of uncertainty like we have right now, employees need to feel valued, and this is the step that you can take to that end. Just to give you a quick idea, An average back injury costs $52,000. An average repetitive motion injury costs $40,000. And all of these costs mean higher premiums. And this is why we're addressing these issues. And now we have increased risk factors because of the home office scenarios. There are also indirect costs, such as the cost of training a new employee to replace someone who's injured, and these costs could be 4 times as much. And all the injuries today we're going to be talking about are progressive injuries. So the more they're ignored, the more expensive they become, the more difficult it is to fix them. But before we get going, we're interested in you and how you're dealing with this home office situation so far. We want to do a quick poll. We're going to ask you this question. With the employees working from home, what employer-provided equipment do most of your employees have in their home offices? Remember, this is employer-provided equipment. So what have you provided to your employees so far? And go ahead and click all that apply, and we'll give you a couple seconds to go ahead and do that.
Okay, it looks like only about half have voted, so we'll give you a few more seconds. There's also a scroll bar on the right if you're not able to see all of the available options. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll and share the results.
Okay. This is about what we had in the last session of this webinar. Laptop computer is at the highest. That's pretty much what we thought was going to happen. We're glad to see keyboard and mouse being part of that, and monitor as well. Very good. Well, these are really good results. I'm glad to see what you're all doing. So, thank you so much. All right. So ergonomics. Ergonomics is about creating the fit between the capabilities of the worker, their size, strength, their level of endurance, and the job itself. We can't change the worker, but we do have the ability to change the job tasks, the equipment, the environment, in order to avoid musculoskeletal injuries. So musculoskeletal disorders, also known as musculoskeletal injuries, are injuries to bones and soft tissue. As I mentioned, these injuries are progressive. They begin with some discomfort or numbness, then they develop into pain, and at some point you have a loss of function. And at that point, you often can't get back to that first stage anymore. So it's important to address these issues as they first arrive. So what are soft tissues? Well, they're muscles, ligaments, and tendons. The red areas in this picture are the muscles. The whiter areas are mostly the tendons and some ligaments. Muscles are red because they contain a lot of blood. Just think of a raw steak. That blood provides those muscles with oxygen and nutrients. It also removes the waste product of that work, which is lactic acid. Muscles work by contracting. Basically, they tighten up, and you can overstretch a muscle or even tear it, and that's called a strain. Tendons connect muscle to bone. They're very tough. They're not designed to stretch. When tendons are stretched or torn, it's called a strain. Tendinitis, or the inflammation of a tendon, is a common type of injury associated with computer work. Common sites of injuries are the shoulders, hands, wrists, forearms. For example, the group of muscles and tendons surrounding the shoulder joint is called the rotator cuff. The rotator cuff tendinitis in an office is often referred to as mouse shoulder because it can result from extending your arm too far away from your body when you're using a mouse. Ligaments are tough bands of tissues around your joints. They connect bone to bone. When these fibers tear, it's called sprains. So when people think of a typing injury, it's almost always carpal tunnel syndrome. In the middle of the wrist, the carpal tunnel is a U-shaped row of bones with a ligament across the top that creates an actual tunnel. There's only so much space in there. It's a finite amount of space. The tendons that make your fingers move go through that tunnel. When When the tendons become inflamed due to overuse, they pinch or compress the median nerve, and that results in pain, tingling, or weakness of the hand. Surgery usually relieves this pain, but oftentimes it results in a loss of grip strength. So let's talk about the risk factors normally associated with computer work. But in these cases, these risk factors can really be ramped up in a home office scenario. Injury risk factors include forceful exertions, awkward postures, repetition, static posture, and contact pressure. And we're going to talk about all of these. So force is the amount of muscular effort needed to perform a task. On average, a computer typist hits the spacebar 669 times per hour, and an average computer user works on a computer 6 hours a day plus 1 to 2 per night. So if you're wondering, gosh, can I really have a dangerous amount of force in a home office? Well, yes, even though a keystroke is a small amount of force, when you add up the thousands of times you hit the keys each day, it does add up to a lot of force. All those keystrokes and mouse clicks, they count. And they count even more if we perform these little tasks in an awkward posture. So the best way to understand awkward posture really is to understand the opposite of that, which is a neutral posture. Neutral posture is where two bones come together to create a joint, and that joint, at that point, is in a position to work the most effectively. Now, the wrist that you see in this picture, the wrist is more complex than a simple joint, but it's a really good illustrator. For instance, if we pick up a lime and we try to squeeze it to get all the juice out of it, we automatically go to our neutral position. That position for the wrist is where it's the most effective and the most efficient. We would never take that same lime and angle the wrist downward and then squeeze, because to get the same amount of juice, we would need to use much more force as an awkward posture. So there's one neutral position for each joint, and everything else is an awkward position, less efficient. So neutral position for the human body in an office setting looks like this picture you see here. The shoulders are relaxed with the arms down by the sides. The wrists are forward and they're straight. The head is directly over the shoulders, not leaning forward. And we face forward, less frequently looking either to the right or the left. And when we sit, the feet are supported on the floor or on a footrest. And note that the elbows are at 90 to 110 degrees. And the typing surface is at the elbow level, and that's key. This gives you the neutral posture for the shoulders, elbows, and wrists. For the chair, the knees are at the same height as the hips, or maybe just a hair below, and this gives you nice even pressure along the length of the leg. At that point, your feet should be on the ground or on a footrest. So all these postures together is your neutral position you're looking for while using the computer in a seated position. This doesn't mean that you should ever move from this position, but this is a great starting point. There are lots of other joints in the body in which people experience awkward postures during computer use. When people think of the muscles required to use a computer mouse, for instance, people think of the wrist and maybe the forearm, but actually the shoulder will often come into play, especially as the mouse moves away from the body, as you see in the top picture. The best place for the mouse is at the same height as a properly positioned keyboard. You'll want both of these at elbow height, and we'll talk about that later. So to help you set up a workplace properly, it might be helpful to think in terms of zones. The primary zone is within immediate reach. And this is for items that we use the most frequently. Some items, for example, in the primary zone, of course, would be a keyboard and a mouse. The secondary zone is for items to keep within arm's reach that you use occasionally. Things in the secondary zone might include hard copy documents, stapler, pens, paper, and notepads. The far zone requires you to bend forward to reach for the items. These items would be items you use less frequently, like the computer monitor, or if you use the phone very infrequently, that's where you would place the phone. These are awkward postures typically associated with typing or mousing, bending the wrist to the right or the left, or the wrist tilted up. This is the awkward posture, by the way, that is normally associated with carpal tunnel syndrome when you tilt your wrist upward. So you don't want to use the kickstands that you normally find at the back of the keyboard, normally. Repetition is defined as a number of tasks performed over and over again using the same body part. These pictures show examples of repetitive tasks that are risk factors for injuries. So when you're evaluating risk of musculoskeletal injuries, look at the repetition your employees are experiencing and think about this. Before we were forced into the home office scenario, work tasks were becoming more and more, quote, paperless, even if you didn't have an official paperless program. Everything was moving toward electronic copies. Home offices are certainly speeding up that need for electronic copies of almost everything. And these are all keyboard and mouse activity tasks. Those are risks certainly ramped up because of the home office scenarios. So remember, when you have too much repetition and not enough break time, your soft tissues don't have time to repair themselves from being overused. Static postures refer to non-moving postures. Even though muscles aren't moving, they're still working. They're holding the posture. This is referred to as static loading. Regardless of the position you're in, static loading is not good. The body was made for movement, which is why we have so many joints and tendons and bones throughout our body. When working on a computer, we'll sometimes move our head forward so it no longer sits directly over our shoulders. This happens when the monitor is too far away or it's difficult to read because it's maybe dirty, it has dust on it. This also happens when we start feeling fatigued. The muscles that hold the head out away from the body, they have to pull downward to suspend the weight of the head. Otherwise, the head will just go crashing into your chest. The effect of this increase of pressure is the same as having a heavier head. So for every inch of forward head posture, the pull on your muscles increase the weight of the head on the spine by an additional 10 pounds. So moving your head 3 inches forward is 30 pounds of extra pressure on your spine that doesn't need to be there. So proper monitor placement is very important. We refer to this posture as turtleneck syndrome, and it's important to be mindful of avoiding this. And this illustration here is a great illustration on how laptops are great for portability, but an ergonomic nightmare. So why is static work a problem? Well, it's because muscles get nutrients and oxygen from blood flow. This blood flow also removes waste associated with muscle activity. So for resting muscles, like we see here, like laying on the couch, not a lot of blood flow is needed, and that's okay because lack of activity doesn't cause much blood flow. Resting muscles don't require many nutrients and oxygen, and they don't get it. For working muscles that are used in dynamic work scenarios, high blood flow is needed, and those muscles do get it because the muscles are moving. And here's the problem. During static work scenarios, static loading, your muscles are working by holding that static position and they need more blood. However, this type of work doesn't have a lot of muscle movement. High blood flow is needed, but it's not happening. The blood cannot deliver the nutrients and oxygen they need. Lactic acid isn't removed and it builds up and fatigue is a result. That's why we're sore in the neck and the shoulders at the end of the day after a stressful workday at the computer. Another risk factor is contact pressure or contact stress. This occurs when pressure is placed on soft tissues, which can result in an injury. Some examples are behind the knee. This happens when you sit in a chair and the seat pan is too long for you. The chair presses against the back of the leg. under the back of the thigh, such as from the seat pan itself. And this can occur if you're sitting toward the edge of the seat pan, or if the seat pan doesn't have enough padding, or maybe the seat pan is just too small. Elbow on the chair or desk. In a chair, this can happen if you have hard armrests. Forearm on the desk. This is an important one for the home office. As shown in the picture, this happens frequently when the chair is too low and the keyboard is too high. It's higher than your elbows. So if your employees are working at the kitchen table or the dining room table, this is what they're likely experiencing. Palm wrist pressure can occur when you're wearing a thick watch or a bracelet, or you rest your wrist on the desk. Wrist pressure can happen if you place the keyboard above elbow height, like you see in the picture. It doesn't take much pressure on the wrist, by the way, to have an impact. There's very little protection at the wrist. There's a lot of nerves, tendons, and muscles working in there. So now I'm going to hand you over to Bonnie. She's going to talk about some solutions that she has for you.
Thank you, Mike, and good morning, everyone. So as Mike indicated, I'll be talking about some solutions to avoid the risk factors and injuries that Mike discussed. Our teleworker sitting here is in what we would call optimal posture. The top of the monitor is eye level. If he wore bifocals or trifocals while viewing the monitor would need to sit a bit lower to avoid bending his neck back. He also should be facing forward and not twisting his neck to either side when viewing the monitor. The shoulders are relaxed. Armrests that are too high can cause the shoulders to hunch. Over time, this can result in shoulder, neck, and even upper back pain. Elbows are at the same height as the keyboard and close to the sides. Elbows lower than the keyboard can result in contact pressure with wrists or forearms leaning against the desk or table. If the worker is limited to sitting too low, that's one of the rare times when we recommend using the kickstands at the back of the keyboard to slant it downward. This would help keep wrists straighter if elbows are lower than keyboard. So we want to see wrists in their neutral posture, which is straight. Again, this is best achieved if the elbows are at the same height as the keyboard. The hips and knees should be at the same height, or the knees slightly below the hips. This takes pressure off the lower back and opens the hips. The back should sit against the backrest to reduce static loading of the muscles in the lower back. If the feet are not flat on the floor, they should be supported by a footrest. Dangling feet results in contact pressure to the back of the thighs as they press against the seat edge. It can also pull on the hips, which then creates strain on the lower back. So for the most part, what we're looking for at a standing workstation is a repeat of the sitting postures with a few obvious exceptions. When standing, we often see that the monitor is not high enough, which can cause neck pain over time. Also consider a footrest, which allows you to elevate one foot. This helps to take pressure off the lower back when standing. An anti-fatigue mat can also be used to reduce stress to the joints and back while standing. However, it should be one that is easy to move in and out of position. So this shows the effect of armrests on shoulders. In the left picture, the armrests are at the proper height and close to the body, so the shoulders are supported and relaxed. In the middle picture, the armrests are pulling the arms away from the body, which results in shoulder strain. In the right picture, the armrests are too high, causing the shoulders to be hunched, which can result again in strain to the shoulders, neck, and upper back. Periodic stretches are an important way to avoid injuries. Remember that muscles work by contraction. Throughout the day, the effects of this contraction can be reduced by stretching muscles in the opposite direction. These pictures show 3 of the stretches found in our brochure, Stretches for Office Workers, found on the State Fund website. Now the stretches to the left and right are good for the muscles and tendons in the forearms, and the stretch in the middle picture is good for the muscles in the neck. It's important to note that if you have a pre-existing injury, you shouldn't do any stretches unless you get the okay from your doctor or therapist first. So difficulty viewing the monitor can result in eye strain as well as awkward postures as the worker positions their body to better view the information on the screen. The monitor may be difficult to view due to glare. So look for sources of glare, which can be an overhead light or sunlight coming through a window. A good way to check for glare is by temporarily turning off the monitor. That will allow glare on the screen to be more obvious. Monitors should be placed at 90 degrees to a window. That means the monitor should not face the window or back up to the window like you see in this picture. Facing the window can result in glare from incoming sunlight. Backing up the monitor to the window can result in eyes adjusting to the brighter incoming light, making it difficult to view the screen. If properly positioning your monitor is not possible, use window blinds like she's got here, or other coverings to block light, especially during certain times of the day when the sunlight is brighter. Also, the contrast and font settings on the monitor can be adjusted to make it easier to read what's on the screen. So too much overhead light can result in glare. However, reducing the brightness of overhead light can make it difficult to read documents. For that reason, it's recommended to have a task light on the desk or table surface to increase lighting on your documents. Be sure this task light does not shine directly on your monitor, however. Task lighting becomes increasingly important as we age because the muscles that control the size of our pupils and their reaction to light lose some strength. Also consider the use of computer glasses. These are designed to focus on objects that are at the distance of your monitor or roughly an arm's length away. They may also have lenses with filters, which help to block blue light. This can be beneficial if you're working in the evening, as blue light can affect sleep since it suppresses the release of melatonin. We also recommend the 20-20-20 rule. This was developed by an optometrist to reduce eye strain. So essentially every 20 minutes, take a 20-second break and look at something at least 20 feet away. So ideally get up and walk around to increase blood flow to your body. And this is also a good time to do a stretch. Now remembering to do this is the hard part. So consider setting a 20-minute timer. There is one available on your computer, and the sound is pretty subtle, so it's not annoyingly loud. Just click on the Windows icon on your computer, look up alarms and clock, and set it for 20 minutes. And you can reset it after each alarm. You can also do this on your smartphone. So now that we've discussed risk factors and the best way to set up your computer workstation, what are the challenges to applying this in a home environment? So first of all, you may not have a desk or decent office chair at home. And I saw in the results of the poll that about 13% were given a chair to take home. So that's pretty important to have. Also at the office, when your workstation is set up or you receive new equipment, typically IT personnel takes care of that. At home, you're pretty much on your own. This isn't a problem for some people, but for those who have a very low comfort level with technology, they can find it very intimidating and they may need a lot of hand-holding to get their workstation set up. So on March 1st of this year, things were pretty much humming along as normal. Suddenly in mid-March, all that changed. So for most companies, remote workers are typically a small percentage of the workforce and there's time to plan for it. Suddenly, just about everyone was quickly converted to telework. And those responsible for ensuring these employees had what they needed and knew what they were doing were in the same boat and struggling with the same issues. However, in spite of all these sudden changes, employers are still responsible for employee safety. That means you have to figure out how to make sure they can do their jobs without developing an injury. Many employers have been hit hard financially these last few months. So we're going to show examples of how you can make a big difference, often with few resources. In fact, some of these resources don't cost anything. So we're going to go over some simple and inexpensive equipment that could help allow some adjustability for your employees' home workstations. We'll show you how each of these can be used and how they can improve comfort for your employees. If you're using a laptop, which is likely the case with most remote workers, you run the risk of having a monitor that's too low. That will result in working with your head bent downward. An inexpensive fix is to elevate the laptop using a laptop stand. Then utilize an external keyboard and mouse to keep your arms and wrists in a neutral posture. So there are a variety of laptop stands, one of which is shown here in the upper left. For tall employees, ensure the stand will elevate the laptop high enough so they can work with their neck in a neutral posture. To save money, you could eliminate the stand and utilize a box or stack of books. So as you'll see in the upcoming pictures, the most important items are the external keyboard and mouse. You may also want a larger monitor or need a second monitor. And below in the middle is a clamp-on keyboard tray, which lowers your keyboard. However, you need to make sure the edge of your table is thin enough to use this particular model. So even TV trays can be used as small desks. This picture on the right shows a standard TV tray with a more industrial table tray. These pictures compare the table tray with the standard TV tray found in many homes. As you can see, it's a few inches wider and deeper. These can be obtained in slightly different sizes, and this particular model provides a cup holder which reduces the risk of spilled drinks. It's also height adjustable. Both trays can be used together to further expand the desk space. So here you see a tray used with a dining room table. The tray lowers the keyboard and mouse to a comfortable level. Also in the picture is another example of a laptop stand. As you can see, the height of the stand can be adjusted. If the person needs to read a document, shown as an example of an inline document holder, which fits between the keyboard and monitor. A number of models of laptop stands are available, some for under $40. There are also models that can be placed on the table or desk to the side of the laptop or monitor. Now, the drawback to those is their use will result in some neck twisting to look to the side. However, there's still an improvement over looking down to view a document. So if you're purchasing an office chair, what should we look for? In order to ensure that a chair can fit the worker comfortably, consider the following features. First is seat pan height adjustability. This is the most common adjustable feature which is found in most office chairs. The seat pan depth should also be adjustable. When you sit all the way back in the chair, the back of your knees should be 2 to 3 inches from the front edge of the chair. This properly supports your thighs while avoiding contact pressure behind the knees. The backrest height should allow you to position the lumbar support of the chair at the small of your back. Armrests should be height adjustable to ensure they provide arm support while not placing your shoulders in a hunched position. However, there are individuals who prefer to work without armrests. Now, some workers need special chairs to accommodate their more extreme physical characteristics. These include petite, large, which typically means those over 275 pounds, and basketball player size. The latter are very tall but slender individuals, so a standard seat pan size will fit them, but a standard seat pan height is too low. Office chairs can vary widely in terms of features and quality. BIFMA stands for Business and Institutional Furniture Manufacturers Association. This organization sponsors the development of furniture safety and performance standards. It's accredited by ANSI, which is the American National Standards Institute. These standards are voluntary, so not all office chairs meet them. So the first standard indicated is based on the 95th percentile male body weight of 275 pounds. The second standard is very similar to the first, but an important difference is that it uses tests based on the 99.5 percentile male body weight of 400 pounds. So companies have handled equipment policies in different ways. Rather than purchase additional equipment, some companies have allowed employees to bring their equipment home from the office. At a minimum, this equipment should include their office chair, particularly if they really like it, a keyboard and mouse. Now, some companies have provided a set allowance or stipend to employees to purchase the equipment they need. This stipend can be provided ahead of time or it can be a reimbursement after the employee purchases the equipment. Now, the concern with letting employees choose what they want is that they may spend a minimal amount on a used keyboard, mouse, and monitor, and then spend almost all the money on a really cool gaming chair that doesn't really suit the needs for office work. So for that reason, it's a good idea to create a list of authorized equipment to ensure the stipend is appropriately spent and the equipment is acceptable. An account can be set up with the vendor so the company can get discounted prices. So the basic equipment such as keyboard and mouse should be obtained as soon as possible. Some level of ergonomic evaluation, however, may be warranted before purchasing more expensive equipment. So now we're going to take a look at some examples of what are referred to as work-at-home hacks. In this picture, the worker has a nice office chair but no desk. So they're using the dining room table, which sits higher than a standard desk. By raising the chair to its maximum height, she is close to a good position in terms of her elbows. However, they're still slightly lower than a keyboard, and you can see her wrist against the edge of the table. The monitor is elevated to a good height by using a laptop stand. Her feet, which would normally be dangling with her chair raised so high, are supported by utilizing a step stool. She could have raised herself a little higher by adding a cushion on the chair. Also, since her elbows are a bit lower than her keyboard, this is one of those situations where it might be helpful to utilize the rear kickstands on her keyboard in order to keep her forearms and wrists straight. Now, in the second picture, she's standing at the table. Although standing is a good way to break up constant sitting, it should be done for only short periods of time due to the stress to the joints and increased risk of developing varicose veins. The standing workstation is essentially obtained at no cost other than the external keyboard and mouse. A box is used for the keyboard, and a plastic storage bin and books are used to elevate the monitor. In this picture, a clamp-on keyboard tray is utilized, which allows her to lower her keyboard to elbow height. This is a more neutral posture and reduces the risk of contact pressure. Here's a standing workstation set up at the kitchen counter. A wooden box is used to elevate the laptop, so her wrists are in a neutral posture. However, her neck is bent downward while viewing the monitor. In the second workstation, an external keyboard and mouse are used with a laptop stand, which allows this worker to bring her monitor up to eye level. This teleworker is using a tray table for the external keyboard and mouse. She's also using a laptop stand and an inline document holder, so it's a pretty good workstation. She does have a tendency to let her wrist drop down. Perhaps a wrist rest or slightly lowering the tray can help out with that. So here's Mike using his laptop on his couch. Although his wrists are neutral, his neck is bent forward in an awkward posture. Also, the laptop can generate a lot of heat on the legs. Now, this may feel great in the winter, but not at this time of year. In this picture, he's placed his laptop on a lap desk. These can be purchased for about $25. Also, a wide game box, such as a Monopoly box, can be used for the same purpose. This avoids the buildup of heat on his legs and provides a solid surface for using his mouse. However, his neck is still bent forward in an awkward posture. In this third picture, Mike has replaced the lap desk with a thick pillow. This raises the level of the laptop, reducing the awkward posture of his neck. However, there's no solid surface for the mouse, so perhaps a lap desk or box can be placed on the cushion to provide a harder mousing surface. If the mouse is not needed, then that's not an issue. So on fair weather days, it's nice to get out of those four walls, as long as it's not too hot. So I've set up this workstation in a nice shaded area. A small portable workstation provides flexibility in terms of avoiding glare and direct sunlight. However, as you can see, my head is bent down because the monitor is too low, and my back is not supported by the patio chair. The seat pan is rather large, and the chair back is uncomfortable because it's metal. So now I've added a shoe box on which to place the laptop, and I'm using an external keyboard and mouse. This has improved my neck posture considerably. However, my back is still not supported, and the very small work surface doesn't really provide room for documents or a drinking cup. So 2 additional items have been added here. First, a thick, comfy pillow has been provided for back support. Second, an additional larger tray table has been added to expand my desk area. It's also raised my monitor a few more inches to further improve the height. After initially working with what is available to make this situation work, it can be set up quickly. You can create some extra room for a mouse by placing a book next to the keyboard tray, something that extends a bit beyond the tray. Just make sure it's not too thick, because that'll raise your mouse up too much. So this workstation can be set up inside the house too, of course. Perhaps you don't have a desk or can't use the dining room table. Maybe there's others in the house on phone calls and video conferencing, and you need to find an area without distractions. So you could even set up something like this in a walk-in closet if you need the privacy. Some workers, particularly younger ones, are only interested in solutions that are quick and easy. However, I see a turtleneck here. Clearly, a TV tray is not going to work in this situation. Although there are clearly concerns with the situation on the right, it's still more comfortable and desirable for the worker. This can be an acceptable short-term solution, which will allow them to enjoy a change of scenery. So here's Mike reclining in his bed. He's made things a bit more comfortable by placing pillows under his knees and back. This posture helps to take pressure off the spine. However, as you can see, his neck is bent forward. Perhaps another pillow would help him sit up more or support his neck. But again, this is really just a short-term solution. So as you can see from the slide, the cost of the different devices that we just showed you is relatively inexpensive compared to the impact they can make. The prices of this equipment on this slide, of course, are rough estimates. So as mentioned previously, the most important items are the external keyboard and mouse. Inexpensive models can be obtained for as little as $15. A monitor can be obtained for about $83 for a total investment of less than $100. Laptop stands are available for as little as $40, or simply use a box or stack of books. The clamp-on keyboard tray shown here is about $50, and table trays run about $45. And perhaps you've already got a set of standard TV trays in your home. A 2-piece set runs roughly about $50. So now I'm going to turn you back over to Mike. We've developed some forms that should be helpful for conducting ergonomic evaluations for your employees working at home. Mike's going to show you those forms and take you through a virtual ergonomic evaluation.
All right, thank you, Bonnie. We have 2 electronic forms that we're going to be giving you that will help you perform very basic ergonomic evaluations on your employees without going into their homes. The evaluations you'll perform won't allow you to address every ergonomic issue, but these tools will allow you to at least start addressing the really important ones that we are seeing, the ones we know historically need attention. So first, we'll have you send home the home office ergonomics questionnaire to the employee, and we're going to be giving you this form. The employee is the one who fills this out. Most of the questions are drop-down menus, and it's really easy to fill out. Second, when the employee returns the form to you, you review the completed form. Don't worry, you don't have to be an ergonomics expert. These forms will walk you through the whole thing. Then you complete the home office ergonomics follow-up form. We're going to give you this form too. And then make a connection with the employee to review your recommendations. So both of these forms will become internal forms within your organization and act as great documentation. So this is the first form. This is page 1 of 2. Right now they're fill-in forms, but the next version, of course, will be the drop-down menus, and it won't take the employee long to fill out this form. This is page 2 of 2. It's only a 2-page form. The pictures here are sample pictures for the employees to mimic. We want the employees to send the full body pictures head to toe so you can see how they interact with their workstation. And it'll give you a good idea of how they're doing. And you'll also want to see under the chair, like the last 2 pictures, so you can see what kind of chair adjustment features you're working with. If it's a dining room chair, it'll be a bust, but at least you tried. For employees who live alone, they can use the self-timer so they don't have to ask someone to help during social distancing. When the employee returns the form, it'll look like this. So we filled one out for you. It's a fictitious employee by the name of Mike Andrews, and we're going to go through the form. So the first part is identifying information. The employee's name, the title at the time of the evaluation, who their supervisor was, the date, great identifying information. So when you're looking at this 10 years from now, you know exactly what was going on. The next section is the work information, the types of breaks that they take. In this case, he's not taking a break in the afternoon, glasses that they have, and the type of discomfort they might have. This section here is the work location and job information. At the bottom of this section, general job responsibilities. We want to find out what types of responsibilities they're performing or tasks they're performing in their home office. Physical tasks and job information, how much sitting, how much standing, how much walking, do they take their normal breaks? And then also types of computer programs. Is it click intensive with a mouse? Is it typing keystrokes? Is it proprietary software? Again, these forms are made for discovery and starting a conversation. And the last part of this form is the physical tasks, the amount of computer work, web meetings, emails, phone calls, things like that. And then comments or questions for the employee to provide. So this is our fictitious employee, Mike Andrews. He sent back some great photographs. We can see how he's interacting with the equipment that he has. And he was even nice enough to send us some standing photographs. You can see how he's interacting with it there, and also a picture of the chair. So once your employee returns this first form to you, you fill out the form that you see here. This is the second form we're going to give you. It's the Home Office Ergonomics Follow-Up Form, and we're going to go through this. So the first section is the chair information. This is important because whenever we do an ergonomic evaluation, we always start with the chair. We get the chair right, and then we set everything else around the person. So on the left-hand column are the items that we want to look at. The middle column here are the questions that we want to ask. And the questions are designed so that we are looking for all yes answers. And if there's a no answer, we'll indicate it and then make a note here. So for the chair, for Mike Andrews, we see on the left, and the ideal, what we're looking for is on the right. For the seat pan, is there about 2 to 3 inches of space from the backs of the knees to the front of the chair? Well, we look at Mike's picture, and we can't really tell. It's a little dark down there. We're not 100% sure. Of course, this is what we're looking for. So we'll mark no here, and when we call Mike, we'll ask him, hey, does the chair touch the back of your legs? We can't really tell from the pictures. So we've got good documentation and a good place for conversation. Now, I just want to take just a moment to address an important lesson from history we need to remember before we continue. Many years ago, when the workforce transitioned from electric typewriters to computer keyboards, there was no such thing as a keyboard tray. So when everyone was assigned their first computer keyboard, where did they put that keyboard? That's right, everyone started typing on the top of their work desks. Those desks are the same height as today's furniture, and nothing has changed. They're about 29.5 to 30 inches. That is the same height as the kitchen and dining room table your employees are typing on right now. So let's learn from history so we don't repeat it. Back in the day, they figured out that they needed to lower those new keyboards that they just got. And it's just as important for your employees to do that in their home offices today. But you don't have to spend a lot of money to reduce or eliminate this risk of awkward posture. You can either use the table tray or the clamp-on keyboard tray that Bonnie showed us earlier. So back to the keyboards and mousing surface, we have to get this right. So let's take a look at Mike Andrews, see how he's doing. The keyboard height, we see, oh no, Mike might have some trouble here. We see that in the standing position, remember we want to have the keyboard at elbow level. It is not, it's a little lower, and we see this angle of the wrist. This is our carpal tunnel syndrome angle. If you remember, we talked about it before. This keyboard is too low in the standing position. So here it is, keyboard height. With the shoulders relaxed, arms hanging at the side of the body with the elbows at 90 to 110 degrees is the keyboard under the palms. Well, the problem really is his elbow angle. It's more than 110 degrees. That puts his keyboard too low. So we'll mark a no here. And when we call Mike, we'll say, hey, your keyboard's a little too low while standing. Let's talk about that. And then we'll instruct him on how to fix that. Monitor information. We see we have a no here. The height of the monitor, the top of the viewing screen should be at or slightly lower than eye level. We see that it is actually a little bit more than we probably would like to see. And it looks like he's looking through the bottom of his trifocals. So that might present an issue. So we're gonna just tell him, hey, you know, the screen is a little bit lower than your eye level while standing. What can we do about that? So, and then the work environment is the next section of this form. Is it free from clutter, allowing the legs to move comfortably, and it's frequently used items? Yes. You see the picture there. And then work practices and recommendations. We remember from the first form, he was not taking his PM breaks, his afternoon breaks. So we need to remind Mike about his breaks. And then this is where we put the recommendations for him. So when we call, we can let him know that, hey, you need to lift your monitors while standing, maybe trifocals. You're looking through the bottom of your trifocals. We might want to use dedicated computer glasses instead of the bottom of the trifocals. So there's that form there. So we all have a brand new set of knowledge for ergonomics, and we're going to give you a quick pop quiz. And if you get things wrong, don't worry about it. It's going to be a lot easier with the form in front of you when you talk to your employees. So for the woman that you see on the right, in the picture on the right, go ahead and mark all the items that you see that might be a problem for this particular employee. So we'll give you about a minute or so.
And if the picture is, or if the poll is blocking your picture, you have the ability to move it to the side to get it out of the way. Looks like there's still a lot of people who haven't voted, so we'll give about another 30 seconds. Okay, it looks like things are slowing down, so I'm going to go ahead and end the poll and share the results.
Oh, makes my heart glad to see this. This is really great. I'm glad everybody, most everybody caught this. Monitor height is indeed too low. That's because laptops are an ergonomic nightmare. They're great for portability, but they're really bad for home office use or office use. Keyboard and mouse are too high. Nicely done. No back support. Fantastic. Remember, we want the keyboard at the level of the elbow. And good catch, everybody. Contact pressure right here. Very good. We got a good, smart group of people on the line. Thank you, everyone. All right. So now I'm going to hand you back over to Bonnie to talk about the stress issues that we see in a home environment?
Thank you, Mike. So stress, of course, is something we deal with every year. But I think we can agree that this has been a particularly hard-hit year. Many organizations are indicating this has actually become their biggest concern. There's some real morale issues associated with it. So signs that employees are struggling with stress can be seen if they're more easily frustrated and argumentative, have extreme weight gain or loss, have pre-existing mental health or substance abuse conditions that have become worse, or show a lack of energy or lack of focus for an extended period. We've also included this subject because stress can have a significant impact in regards to both enhancing the perception of pain as well as increasing the likelihood of developing an injury. This is due to a variety of adverse reactions of the body to stress, one of which is that muscles become more tense and less flexible. So these effects can result in additional wear and tear on the body. So what are the stressors associated with this current work at home world we're in? So typically the primary source outside of the home of being around other people is in the office. That source was abruptly ended earlier this year, along with most other options for physically socializing. For that reason, some employees who live alone may request to continue to come into the office because it's difficult for them to endure that much isolation. Many workers are concerned about their job security or their spouse's job security, school closures, or just wondering when life may get back to normal. So this makes it difficult to plan for the future, which takes away a sense of control over your life. At home, we may have a number of distractions which interrupt our focus throughout the day. So trying to work through those distractions can be very frustrating. It also requires more self-control to stay on task, which in and of itself is more mentally taxing. Also, how well you handle stress can be impacted by your home environment. Is it a supportive one, or does it create more stress? So working longer hours, perhaps too many video meetings, juggling work and childcare at the same time, these all contribute to mental and emotional exhaustion or just feeling burned out. There can actually be too much connectivity. One video conference after another can create more stress, so there should be a healthy balance with non-virtual periods. Also, if you're in a virtual meeting or attending a training such as this, and you're not a speaker, consider muting yourself and either turning off your camera or using a photo placeholder. This would allow you more flexibility to get up during the session and move around while still staying engaged. So disconnecting, which is also referred to as psychologically detaching, refers to the act of mentally switching off from work. Working from home often blurs work and non-work boundaries, particularly when you have a lot of distractions at home. So for that reason, remote workers tend to work longer hours compared to those working in the office. This reduces the amount of time we have to decompress or relax from the workday. So turn off your computer at the end of the workday and try and walk away from it until the beginning of your shift the next day. So we take for granted the physical activity involved with just going to work in an office, which involves getting out of bed and getting dressed, walking out to the car or public transportation, walking into the office, and so on. That activity is largely gone when we work at home. Add to that the closure of gyms and sports facilities and many other activities. So daily physical activity is important for your mental health. Be sure to take your regular work breaks, including micro breaks, and incorporate movement and stretches throughout your day. Also, it tends to improve your mental state if you spend some time outside every day. So those with a disability, substance abuse, or pre-existing mental health issue, or those with an affected family member may suddenly have been left without access to the resources they relied on. With the schools going virtual, many parents have lost services for disabled children. Home health services, counseling, and support groups have also likely been interrupted. The loss of support from critical services could significantly add to stress levels. So what can the employer or manager do to deal with the situation? The management team, direct supervisors, and human resources personnel should receive some training on respectful communication, conflict resolution, and stress management, so they're better able to understand and address employee stress. This training should include recognizing changes in employee behavior that may trigger offers for employee assistance. So regular communication is really important to keep a pulse on how your employees are doing in terms of both worker performance and their well-being. However, it should provide the worker with a sense of being supported rather than micromanaged. So this can be done in both a group situation, which helps to maintain a sense of unity between coworkers, and also in one-on-one talks, which provide privacy in case an employee wants to communicate any struggles they're having. Employees are individuals with unique challenges, and it's important that managers understand that just the stress can have an impact on both the perception of pain and development of an injury. The sense that the employee feels like their particular issues are acknowledged and supported by their supervisor can have a similar impact. So with everyone working at home, clear, consistent, and transparent communication can help alleviate confusion and uncertainty that can increase anxiety levels. It's important that employees understand how, why, and when decisions are made and what management expectations are. So make sure that you deliver information in a variety of ways to avoid the rumor mill, which can be a greater issue when everyone is working remotely. So provide lots of opportunities for employees to share feedback. This gives them a voice and helps management get a feel for what employees are thinking and what their attitude is about various issues. Consider a virtual town hall with open discussions, also regular newsletters. More discreet options can include a confidential email address or hotline, or an anonymous survey sent to employees. So employees who may be struggling should be assured that they're not out there alone. Be ready to offer resources to assist them. Now, depending on the employer, these can include employee assistance programs that provide access to counseling or other services, or even small employers can provide information on various organizations that offer assistance for a variety of situations. So you want to help employees continue to feel like they're still very much part of a team. Provide opportunities for informal virtual gatherings that are not about work, such as hosting virtual happy hours. Another option is to support the creation of special interest groups within your organization, which help workers connect with others who have similar interests or also similar challenges. And of course, with all that your employees are dealing with these days, just try to be flexible. Following are some resources that should help with issues we've covered in this webinar. So State Fund has a website that offers a number of resources. Most of these resources are available to the general public and not just our policyholders. When you go to this website, this is the very first page you'll see. So you can quickly and easily find COVID-related resources by clicking on that blue Learn More button, circled in red. When you click on topic, as shown here, you can select ergonomics. This will take you to a page that includes a template for developing a written ergonomics program, as well as a number of other ergonomics resources. As Mike mentioned before, the IIPP builder can be found here. That link is circled in green right there. So clicking on this will take you to a template so you can build your injury and illness prevention program. Again, this is like the tax preparation software that walks you through the entire process and produces an IIPP specific to your needs. So when you click on that blue Learn More button, then scroll down until you see Mike's smiling face here. You'll see tips on proper ergonomics at home. Click on the top item that I got circled in green, and you'll see the menu of additional resources, which are shown on the right. So these resources include the forms that Mike showed you for doing a virtual ergonomic assessment. There's also a home office safety checklist to ensure the worker's home environment has met required safety features, including fire safety and electrical safety. And there's also a section on computer workstation setup. There are helpful videos, also the stretches for office workers that we saw previously. Finally, there's an infographic, which is essentially a poster with pictures regarding ergonomics at home. So here's a few resources that can guide employees as they set up their computer workstations. The Federal Occupational Safety and Health Administration provides a computer workstation e-tool on their website. It also provides a purchase guide checklist. Now, the California Occupational Safety and Health Administration has a publication with a number of helpful photos that show step-by-step how to set up your computer workstation to avoid injuries. The last item is a free app that's very helpful for setting up your computer workstation at home. It's called Home Office Ergonomics. Now, as far as psychosocial resources, the CDC has a web page dedicated to coronavirus resources on stress and coping. This page lists various organizations that can help with issues such as suicide prevention, domestic violence, elder care, etc. Also, the National Safety Council COVID-19 webpage lists a number of resources and tools to manage mental health concerns. Okay, so now I will turn the presentation over to Jennifer for the question and answer portion of the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie, and thank you, Mike, as well, for joining this webinar today and sharing your insights into how California businesses can improve the comfort of their employees working from home and prevent musculoskeletal injuries. I encourage all of you to visit the many ergonomic resources and videos that we have on our Safe at Work CA site. SafeAtWorkCA.com has over 1,000 safety publications, articles, safety meeting topics, training videos, and hazard checklists on a variety of workplace safety topics. And we have training videos that discuss many of the techniques for evaluating workstations that Mike covered in the webinar, which you can use to refresh your memory on some of the key points. I would also like to thank everyone who submitted questions during the webinar. We are going to try our best to answer as many questions as we can. I wanted to tell you again that we will be sending out to everyone who attended a link to the webinar recording, as well as a copy of the slides presented and a list of resources from the webinar, including the forms that Mike went over and the resources that Bonnie just discussed. So because we have so many questions, I just wanted to say that we're going to really focus on the ergonomic related ones. We've gotten a lot of questions about legal liability and employer obligations to purchase equipment, which is really outside of our realm of expertise. So we're going to focus on the ergonomic focus questions. But I also did want to remind you that when you leave the webinar, please complete the webinar survey, which will appear on your screen in a new tab, because your feedback really is important to us. We are new to doing these safety webinars, and we want to know what topics you're interested in and how we can improve upon them. So to begin questions, first question for Mike. We have a question: if someone complains of shoulder discomfort, what would you recommend that the employer look at or recommend to them?
This is a good question. You know, without too much more information, it's difficult to say, but I can guess this. It's probably a single shoulder. I've never, in my years of doing these evaluations for the office, I've never seen a bilateral or both shoulders hurting. So also, it's probably the right, because we ask our right hand to do so much more than the left hand. Because if everyone looks at their computer keyboard right now, the left hand takes care of the alpha keys and number keys on the left-hand side of the keyboard. That's all the left hand does. Then the right hand takes care of the right hand alphas and numbers, the enter key, the delete key, the up arrow, down and right left keys, the 10 key, and then we also have the mouse. So the shoulder, the upper arm, the forearm, the hand, the wrist, always on the right hand side. Whenever we see one hand or one arm hurting over the other, it's always the right. So if it's a shoulder injury, there's a good chance that you might help this risk by more evenly distributing the workload between your two hands. And so one of the best things that I've seen through the years is taking the duties of mousing and moving it from the right hand to the left hand. And again, that more evenly distributes the workload between your two upper extremities, including, as I mentioned in the presentation, shoulder during the mousing scenario. So if you're probably mousing too far out, you might have a shoulder issue there. So good question, and needs a little bit more digging, but that's a great fix that I've seen over the years.
Great, thank you. Question for Bonnie. Do you have any guidance on the use of multiple screens or monitors, for example, side-by-side monitors, or perhaps the laptop screen with an external monitor next to it?
Yeah, well, basically, when you're using multiple monitors, you want to make sure they're right next to each other. There's no space between them, and they're at the same height. So that's the most fundamental thing with them. But probably the biggest issue I've seen in terms of using multiple monitors is particularly when they have two large monitors. There's a lot of neck twisting going on. And in fact, I've seen individuals who the neck twisting is so uncomfortable, they're constantly trying to adjust, the positioning of the monitors because it's just, they're trying to get rid of some of that neck twisting. So to resolve that, I would recommend making one monitor your primary monitor, if you can do that. If you can do the vast majority of your work on one monitor and utilize the other one for occasional use. That's really the most optimal situation. If you really need to use them both about the same, then situate them so that where they come together is pretty much right in front of you. They could be, where they come together could be moved a little to the right also, because you do tend to look a little bit more to the left of your screen. So moving them off to the right. So basically that is an attempt to try and reduce neck twisting as much as possible.
Great, thank you. A question for Mike. Are there risks with not having armrests, or is it actually better?
There's no inherent risk for not having armrests. What you run into, well, first let me say that doing this for so many years, I've come across a handful of people, maybe a dozen or so, that just absolutely will not consider sitting in a chair with armrests. They can't explain it. I've tried to really dig down to find out why is that. Never come up with a really good answer to that question. But they do that for years, and there's no issue. What I do recommend to those individuals is if your shoulders ever feel like they're a little bit more fatigued or you're getting some kind of pain, try armrests. So you can give your shoulders a rest, because what they do, they allow your arms to rest comfortably by your side while you're performing all your functions. So and you don't want, like we saw in the slide earlier, we don't want them too far out, and we don't want them too high up so that we have a hunched position. So inherently, no, it's not bad, but try both ways. Okay,
great, thank you. Question for Bonnie. Could you clarify or explain the statement that extended periods of standing can lead to increased risk of varicose veins? The participant hadn't heard that before and likes to stand often. Is there a way to stand often and avoid or minimize that risk?
Yeah, actually, standing workstations have become, a thing for probably about the last 15 years because someone said a while back that sitting is the new smoking. But the problem is standing has its own issues. The issue with too much sitting is that you're not getting enough exercise. You're not getting enough movement. We talked about how important it is to incorporate a lot of movement throughout your day, so you have that blood going to those muscles. You're reducing that static loading in your muscles. So you want to get up and have movement. Now, some people prefer to stand, and that's fine. But like I said, it has its own issues. By standing, you are putting more stress on your joints, and it does increase the risk of varicose veins. Now, if you do prefer to stand, then make sure you wear comfortable shoes. If you're standing on particularly a hard surface, say if you've got a tile floor in your home and you're standing, well, that's going to create even more stress on your joints. So you want to perhaps have the anti-fatigue mat or wear shoes with anti-fatigue quality in them. There are anti-fatigue insoles. There are comfortable supportive shoes that you can wear. So the concern is if maybe you're standing barefoot on a hard floor, or you've got heels on, or you're just wearing flip-flops that don't really give you any support or cushioning. So in order to reduce the risk associated with standing, make sure you've got some level of cushioning there for your feet. So either something you're wearing or something you're standing on. Now, if you alternate at a workstation between sitting and standing, it's important that if you do use a mat, that it's something that's easily moved out of the way. You know, we have the more heavier industrial type anti-fatigue mats. You really don't want that because that can create its own problems moving that in and out of place. But there are mats now that are designed for standing computer workstations that you can just move out of the way easily just by pushing them lightly with your foot. So there's a lot of different options for those now. So basically, you know, just to wrap it up, I'll just say if you want to stand, that's fine. Just make sure that you do have something that absorbs, you know, that hardness from the floor, and that will make it easier on your joints. So either wear supportive, comfortable shoes with cushioning or stand on something that has cushioning. But also you need to break up the standing. So it's better to alternate between sitting and standing.
Okay. Great, thank you. So this question kind of wraps up several questions into one, and I'm going to ask both of you to comment on it, but we'll start with Mike. So question is, do you recommend ergonomic type mice or keyboard with ergonomic in quotes? And related to that, there's been questions about like trackpad mice or vertical mice or split keyboards. So all kind of different forms of equipment that is traditionally advertised as ergonomic. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, sure. Great question. The term, quote, ergonomic, unquote, is nothing, there's nothing official. There's no certification process. I could create any kind of product and call it ergonomic, never having a certified ergonomist take a look at the design or application. So whenever you see ergonomic, be a little skeptical. But in regards to the alternative mice, I like the vertical mice in a lot of scenarios. It puts your hand in a more neutral handshake type posture. And the split keyboards, I like those a lot. They keep your hand in a more neutral position that we talked about. And for people who are barrel-chested or their shoulders are a little bit wider, it allows a split keyboard with a V in the middle. It allows you to come in at a really good angle without having to press your arms in to get into a standard keyboard. So I'm sorry, Bonnie, I probably answered all that. I'm sure you have at least one more item to add to that.
Well, I don't know. I think starting off your answer with the fact that anything to be called ergonomic was important. Right. Basically, you just need to make sure you're doing that it really is something that does help your particular situation and that you're using the equipment properly. You know, something that we recommend is, you know, most people can work fine with traditional equipment, but for some people, it's going to make a huge difference. So one of the things that we typically recommend is that you have a checkout system, that the employer has a few alternative items available. And so rather than rushing out and buying something that you don't know is going to work, it's really handy to let somebody check it out. And it's good to have them use it for a couple of weeks, because it takes a couple of weeks for you to develop muscle memory when you're trying something different. but yeah, so hopefully that answers that question.
Great, thank you. Wanted to meet, had indicated that they're taller than 6'1" and wanted to know how they can check that their chair is adequately sized for them. Bonnie, could you speak to that?
So how tall was that?
6'1".
6'1"? Okay. Well, and you know what? We're all built differently. So one person who's 6'1" has legs of a certain length, and some people who are 6'1" have legs of a very different length. I'm 5'6", my husband's 6'1", and we have the same inseam. So that you have to consider that. Now, one person who's 6'1" may need a chair that has a higher cylinder in it because perhaps they have very long legs. Basically, if you can sit in your seat and your feet sit comfortably on the floor and you don't have to fold them under the chair under you to be comfortable, then it should be tall enough for you. That's just a simple way of determining that.
Also, if they look at the ergonomic follow-up form, it's got those 5 questions in the chair section. That'll give you a really good start.
Okay, great, thank you. And this is kind of a follow-up to that, but it was asked by a different attendee. So, Mike, sitting with the hips lower than the knees, is this considered bad for circulation or posture?
Yeah, if the hips are lower than the knees, what's happening there, you get excessive amounts of pressure toward the back of your thighs or on the buttocks. And so that becomes a risk factor of contact stress. When you are able to get your hips at the height of your knees, that gives you nice even pressure along the length of the leg, and that's what you're shooting for. Conversely, if you continue to raise the chair up and then your feet are dangling, that is where you get contact stress at the front of your legs. So you need, at that point, a footrest of some sort. So yeah, a properly positioned chair for height makes a lot of difference in comfort. So if you have an issue where your hips are a little bit lower, try to get that rectified.
Okay, great, thank you. Bonnie, can you speak to the use of balance balls in chairs? Are they recommended, or are there concerns with employees sitting on balance balls or yoga balls rather than a standard office chair?
Yeah, well, balance balls are great for working out in the gym, but they're really not recommended for extended use at a computer workstation. And that's for a variety of reasons. For one, they don't have lumbar support. They're meant to activate your core muscles, which again is great for you in the gym, but that really limits the amount of time you can use them at a computer workstation. So definitely you can't sit on those for over 4 hours a day. You have to choose something else. They don't meet the BIFMA standards. There could be some safety issues with them. There have been injuries associated with them. You know, if you have a stand that they sit in, well, that stand could be in the way of your feet. If you choose to use them without a stand, then you can fall off of them. So, yeah, actually, and when I said 4 hours, that's for an entire workday, so you shouldn't really sit on them for more than, say, 2 hours at a time. So bottom line, we don't really recommend these for use at a computer workstation.
Okay, great. So question from Mike, anything that you would recommend if employees are complaining of wrist discomfort? Like, is there a certain setup that the supervisor should be looking for, or any recommendations for that kind of discomfort?
For wrist discomfort, it depends. It's kind of similar to the shoulder issue I was talking about before. oftentimes we see wrist discomfort when people talk about mousing scenarios. So one of the, like I mentioned before, one of the best things you can do is move the mouse from the right to the left, assuming that it's a right wrist. And Bonnie had a great suggestion, and maybe an employer might want to have a loan program for alternative mice. And if I was to make a loan program for alternative mice, one of them would be a trackball. That's an alternative mouse scenario that you might be able to use. And those are, alternative mice are getting really inexpensive these days. When a model would first come out, they would try to capture as much monetary benefit from the market as possible. And then as copycats came along with their success, the price gets cheaper and cheaper. Trackballs is one of them. Trackballs have been around for quite some time, and it's probably because they work. So I would try a trackball, and then one of the vertical mice that we talked about that put your hand into a more of a handshake type of posture. So if it's related to mousing, yeah, move it to the left or the other hand, or try an alternative mouse.
Okay, great, thank you. So question for both of you. Do you have any other suggestions for people that may not have laptops at home and instead have a tower that's not as easy to set up on one of the, some of the products that you showed, like the table tray and the keyboard tray? Any advice for working with tower computers?
And I assume this person doesn't have a desk that they can use it at, or
it doesn't
use it at
provide that.
Yeah, that's not as, with that, you don't want to have to move it around very much. I mean, you really want to have a set workstation that's going to work if you're using a tower. So you definitely lose some flexibility there. And I would just really caution against moving it from place to place. Just really find a stationary spot to use it at. Mike, do you have anything else to add to that?
For me, I would add the same principles apply for a desktop versus a laptop. You need to have the monitor at the right height, so make sure your monitor is set right, and then also the keyboard and mouse, and we talked about.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe different, totes being used to store Christmas decorations or something in the garage can be used to support the tower, and then the other table trays and so forth can be used for the keyboard and mouse. That might be an unpretty house. So I think we only have time for about one more question. Let's see, is there better to stand up when using a computer if you have lower back pain, or when might you recommend that employees try and use a standing workstation?
Well, I would think if you have lower back pain, standing would probably be worse, because you can get more support for your back. If you don't have a good, while you're sitting, if you don't have a good office chair, then there are back support pillows that can be utilized at another type of chair. I would be cautious about spending too much time standing. In general, the general rule of thumb regards to standing and sitting is, let's see, I believe it's like 2 minutes moving, 8 minutes standing, like 20 minutes sitting. So if you can alternate, that's better. If sitting is causing discomfort because you're in the same position for a while, then you want to try standing, go ahead and alternate. But again, if you're going to be standing, whether or not you have back issues, make sure you've got some kind of cushioning either on your feet or that you're standing on. And, just be mindful of the amount of time you spend standing. Mike, you want to add any more to that?
I would add No, you covered it pretty well, but I do want to cover, I know we're running out of time. There was one question I saw that I really want to get to. It was a question about the sit-stand converters, the desk converters. There are units, mechanical units that sit on top of the desk or attached to the desk that allows you to go from a seated workstation to a standing workstation. So this kind of answers that question. When you're looking at those, try to get the ones that allow, in the seated position, a typing surface below the desktop. So if you're starting at a work surface that's already too high and then you add on that mechanical device, you know, it's going to be even higher. So if you're dealing with a desktop sit-stand converter, make sure that you get one that allows the keyboard to go below the work surface. So sorry, we were running out of time, but that was an important one. I wanted to throw that in there.
Okay, great. Well, that's about all the time that we have for questions. I would like to once again thank Bonnie and Mike for their time during this webinar. And I would also like to thank all of you who attended. You're taking time out of your day to view this webinar demonstrates your commitment to helping ensure a safe workplace for your employees. And please be sure to visit our online safety resource center at safeatworkca.com for more safety resources. And this concludes our webinar. Be safe, everyone.